Hi, this is a demo of ASA integrating with Okta SAML for authentication and also doing ISE Radius Authorization for ISE Posture. So the workflow is that the Anyconnect client will initiate a VPN tunnel request to the ASA, and then the ASA will pass on the user request or user credentials over to Okta portal for SAML authentication. Then on top of that, we're adding on Duo multi-factor authentication. Then once that is successful, ASA will initiate a Radius Authorization request over to ISE to start the posture process. To say I want to start posture, ISE is going to issue a redirect to the ASA to the client to redirect over to ISE. ISE will start the provisioning process of the ISE Posture module down to the Anyconnect client, and then also start the posture process in general. And if the client checks out to be compliant at the end, then ISE tells ASA to go ahead and let the user through and let them connect. All right, let's start by looking at the user experience, and we'll go through the flow here. We'll start with the user experience, and here I have an Anyconnect client VPN that's already been installed, and just never mind the roaming security module, it's just extra here. So I'm going to connect to my ErbLab ASA1, and I'm landing in the Okta tunnel group that has been configured in my ASA. So I'll start by hitting connect, and then the ASA redirects the user over to the Okta workflow for authentication here. So this is my customized page in the Okta portal. I'm going to log in as J.E. Lin, and then user authentication. Okay, and I passed that, and then the second authentication is the Duo multi-factor authentication that I configure in the Okta portal. So it's going to issue a push to me. I'm going to hit send me a push to my phone, and my phone, I just got a buzz and a request. I'm going to hit approve in the Duo app, and now I passed through authentication, and I've landed in the Okta group policy banner with an Anyconnect, so that's a good sign. And now you can see the VPN has connected. I'm connected to the VPN. The timers are going, so it looks great. But our goal is to start the ISE posture provisioning and posture process for this client, right? Being a new client. But let's take a look at this point what is happening in the ASA here. So I hit a refresh for my ASA. I see that J.E. Lin user has connected. If I log on to the details, click on the details, and I move down to look at more details of my flow, I see that ISE ASA work together to start a redirect URL. So ISE push this down to ASA, say there's a redirect URL to go to ISE of 10.2.100, and also a redirect ACL called posture redirect has been initiated in the ASA itself, right? ISE called this. And if I go back to configuration, you can see that in the ACL manager there is a posture redirect URL ACL that's been configured. So my first line is says deny traffic on the ISE. Deny simply in this manner just means that don't redirect, so I just wanted to go to ISE. Then also DNS, I want DNS to go through my ASA to go to the DNS server, so I don't want to redirect that either. And then I'm going to simply redirect everything else for HTTP, HTTPS, right? That basically says redirect all this type of traffic to go to ISE for the posture portal there. All right, so let me go back to the client side. But actually before that, let me show you on the ISE side that in ISE authorization profile, I created a ASA posture redirect rule, and then this is underneath the web redirection for the common task, and this is where ISE calls the POS underscore redirect ACL in the ASA. Okay, and you can see down here these are the two Radius AV pairs of transactions that's being sent to the ASA. Now the static IP hostname FQN checkbox here I've checked, and I put in the IP address of my ISE server. You don't need to do this if your client coming through the VPN tunnel can resolve to the ISE host name by the internal DNS server. Just in my lab, I haven't quite set up the DNS infrastructure, so I just hard code the IP address of my ISE server here, so it gets added to this URL redirect statement. But if you don't put this here, the client just resolves to like the FQDN name of your ISE device, and it'll just work. Okay. Okay. So back to the client side. Now at this point, I need to get the ISE Posture module and go through a posture process. I'm going to go ahead and start the browser on the client, and I'm just going to access a resource in my lab, my internal network, and by that redirect ACL is going to capture traffic and then redirect me over to the ISE portal there. So now you can see my 10.2.2.40 got redirected over to 10.2.2.100, and here's the ISE client provisioning portal. I'm going to hit start, and it's getting ready, and it's going to start the provisioning process of what to do next to get this installed here. Alright, so here's my first time here, so it's giving me instructions, and now basically I need to download the Anyconnect installer. And here it's downloading the Anyconnect ISE NSA, so which is the NSA is just the network setup assistant to provision the modules that I needed. Right? It's 2.5 megs here. It's downloading, and once this is good, I will start this. Let's let it finish. Okay, now that module has been downloaded. I'm going to start it. Hit yes. And it's a network setup assistant. I'm going to trust it. Well, not really trust a connection because my client is not trusting ISE. I don't have the right certificate set up, so we'll just have to manually go through this. Hit connect, and now the downloader is executing and is downloading the ISE Posture module for 4.8. Okay, and it's 3 megabytes in size, so it's not really a large file for the Posture module. Then after this is downloaded, and it'll install, and at the same time it has to download the compliance module as well. And compliance module is 4.3 as of today. And the compliance module basically is, if you take a look at this website, there's Anyconnect ISE Posture support for compliance module. Compliance module basically, it's just a definition from OpSWAT of all the anti-malware, anti-spyware companies, lots of hundreds of them out there with the different versions that we support. So it's a database that we checked against. Okay, you go back to the client side. Alright, we're about 30 seconds away, it looks like, a little bit shy of the halfway through. So once this is downloaded and installed, and we'll complete the posture process. Okay, now the downloader is installing both modules, and says the installation is complete, and I'm done. So at this point, you can see here, I'm going to close the browser in the back because I don't need that anymore. You can see here that it's connected via VPN still, and scanning is going to connect it to my ISE device. I'm going to hit connect because of certificate. And one of the checks that I configure ahead of time is to check for, you can see here, your PC is missing the corporate anti-malware installation. Please install. But I made this to be optional, so it's not required. So I'm going to hit skip for now. And so it basically bypasses that, and now the system scan is going to complete, and we are done. Now the client has been branded compliant to corporate policy. Okay, and if I check here, underneath VPN, that's all the normal stats. The tunnel is still working. And the system scan just means, what did it check for? I checked for 2 requirements. One was a require component for a file check on my PC, and that was completed. And the second one was to check for anti-malware, and you saw that I skipped it because I made it optional. Okay, so that means I still passed. Alright, so if we go back to the ASA side, let's take a look at it now. The ASA session now shows that here's my session I showed you earlier. If I go to details, and now I don't have the the redirect ACL anymore. It's now a new ACL that got pushed down that says ASA VPN underscore allow all. So I am allowed to go through because I've gone through compliance check. And if I take a look at ISE, ISE says, let's go look at the authentication process. I started by, hit refresh. Okay, here we go. So I started with jelin@cisco.com as my identity. That's my MAC address of 52 Delta 9 Windows 10 device, and I landed in the ASA Posture redirect policy that I showed you earlier. And then after I remediated, or I downloaded the ISE Posture module, and I went through the posture check, and then I was deemed ASA compliant. That's my new authorization policy, and now I got a ASA VPN allow all. And if I want to look at the details here for this specific activity, I can see that that's my IP address of my client getting on the Cisco network, and I am compliant by policy. And this is the authorization profile. Everything looks really good. COA was pushed, and this is the final ACL that was pushed. ASA VPN allow all by ISE. Okay. Now let's go ahead and change a few things. So this is the simple one. Let's change a condition to see what happens when I don't pass posture. Well, actually, before that, let me show you what I configure in terms of a policy. From a policy set perspective in ISE, let's go ahead down to my default, because I'm not doing .1x MAB or wire or wireless. So I configure an authorization policy that showed me there's 3 different states. One was Anyconnect compliant, and so that means if I'm coming in via the ASA firewall, I am a compliant device, then I get the allow all policy. And if I am non-compliant, still checking on the ASA firewall, and I'm non-compliant, and then I get a limited or remediation ACL that gets pushed. And then if none of these 2 conditions are met, then I really will be stuck on the posture redirect portal. That's what we saw earlier. When I first got on, I didn't have the posture module. I wasn't matching any of these 2 conditions. I was in the posture redirect state, and then that's when I launched the browser and downloaded the posture module. Okay. And if I want to look at the authorization policies, again, I didn't make any changes, and these are the ASA VPN allow all or a limited. Limited just means I'm pushing down a limited ACL. Okay, and the limited ACL would have a typical ACL permit deny statements that I configured. Okay, all right, so let's go back and take a look at a slightly different condition now. Like what happens if I don't? I'm going to go ahead and hit disconnect here. So I'm logging out of my client. So and then at the same time, I had configured a posture check to check for a specific file on my machine. And it's in my C directory, file check, and it's called test file. But I'm going to make it so it's non-compliant. I'm going to do a no test file, so it's not there, so it won't match. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start my authentication process again. Okay, so I'm here in the group again, but this time I've connected VPN, but system scan is checking my PC right now for compliance. And in this state, it should fail compliance because I don't have the right file. So you can see here, my file requirement is missing that I had configured. And if I had set up remediation, a remediation server, I can actually fix it, but This actually doesn't do anything. It says file requirement is missing because I don't have any remediation action set up. Okay, so basically I'm really stuck here, and my device will be deemed as non-compliant. Your device is posture as non-compliant, okay, and I can't really fix it unless I change that file. So here's another interesting state. So let's go back and take a look at the ASA now of, here's my user session again. I'll hit refresh, and I'll look at details, and you can see here down, ASA got told to push down a ASA VPN underscore limited ACL. Okay, so that's a different ACL than the allow all. So this is working as advertised. And if I take a look at the ISE side, from a, let me take a look at the live logs. There we go. So I started in the posture redirect right here, JELIN posture redirect process. I was stuck in the posture redirect, and then I went through posture check, but I failed posture check. So now I've landed in the ASA limited authorization profile with limited access. Okay. Now let's take a look at a few other things. What happened on the ASA side? How was this all configured? On the ASA side, I configured from a remote access VPN perspective. Here's my Okta connection profile. Okay, and you can see here it's doing SAML to Okta, and these are all the SAML configurations that I configure. I have another video that I recorded prior to show you how to set this up, so please refer to that. And then the normal VPN setup is all the same as you would always do with remote access VPN for ASA. But here, to initiate the authorization process on the ASA, this is where I set up the authorization server group. I pointed over to ISE. And then if I manage this and look at what's in here, within the ISE server group, I've set it up and I enabled dynamic authorization, and also use authorization only mode, meaning that there's no password being shared for the communication. Is really just focusing on authorization, talking to ISE and saying, okay, pass back some attributes and take action here. Okay, so and then down here is let's see, what else have I configured? So that's pretty much it here. So really at this point, from the user perspective, they're stuck in here, and the only way to fix themselves is to cancel and fix the file. I'm going to disconnect here, fix them. So now it's test file again, and I'll go through the authentication process one more time. Okay, now I have re-authenticated back to my group, and now I can see that the scanning module is going to work, and it's doing a scan on my PC, and this time the file check should pass, and then I also should get an option to skip through the, here we go, yep, so my file check went through, and now it just basically says here's my malware again that I'm skipping, since it's like a grace period I'm allowing, and posture is done. Okay, I am compliant, and if I go back to ISE, refresh, here it is. I went through redirect initially, and then I am granted the allow all policy. Okay. All right, we'll take a quick break, and the next section will be on how did I configure the posture checks. Okay, back from our demo here. From a posture check perspective, it's quite a longer process. So let's start by taking a look at policy results, and I'll show you how my two checks were configured. So we start by, you got to go to, when you configure posture assessment, you got to go to the client provisioning portal and download some modules from Cisco. So you can go to agent resources, okay, click here, and it should, assuming your ISE instance is connected, has connectivity out to the internet, it should be able to reach cisco.com. And then there's some modules for network supplicant provisioning for Mac and Windows, etc. that you want to configure. But one of the main things we were interested in is the compliance modules, right? That was a module that was pushed down to the Anyconnect client. So you want to grab the latest, probably the last 2 versions of the Anyconnect compliance module for Windows or Mac. Okay, and so just highlight those and then hit save, and it'll download to your ISE module or ISE instance, as I've done here earlier. Now, so that's a compliant module. Now, to set up Anyconnect modules, if you know the ASA VPN side of it, you got to create the XML profiles and then also push down the module. So first of all, we have to do is install or upload the Anyconnect client. It's a package PKG file that needs to be added. So I would need to go to add resources from local disk, and then I'm going to do a Cisco provided package. And here I'm going to browse to my local Anyconnect PKG file that I downloaded from cisco.com. So in this case, it's 4.8.2045. So I'm going to hit the web deploy for the Windows version. Okay, and I hit open. And then you can see here that it uploaded this PKG file to it becomes a Windows desktop for Windows version 4.8. And then I can hit OK, but I've done this ahead of time, so I'm not going to do it this time here. So now my Anyconnect image, the PKG file, is uploaded to ISE. I need to create a XML profile for Anyconnect Posture. Okay, so what that means is I'm going to create a Anyconnect Posture profile. That'll create the XML profile. Okay, so I can just put a name in here. Any profile. And then you can pretty much leave all these parameters alone by default because they should work unless you want to tune them for different timers, different prompts later on. So I advise you to just start by leaving it at default. And really the only thing you need to configure down here is the server name rules, and this allows you to specify which PSN servers that the clients can connect to. Okay, so by default you can just put a wildcard to allow it to connect any of your PSNs that's going to be in use. That's fine. And then everything else you can just leave it as default and then hit submit. So that creates an XML profile for you for Posture, Anyconnect Posture. But I've done this ahead of time, so I'm going to cancel. So I have one called Anyconnect Posture. You can see here that I created ahead of time, and I call it ISE Posture. Everything's pretty much default with the exception of I added a few extra wording for descriptions and things like that, so it's not really important. Alright, so once we create the XML profile, now let's go ahead and create the Anyconnect final configuration here. So that means we need to go to the add and do Anyconnect configuration. So when you do Anyconnect configuration, it basically creates a file that I've created here. I call it Anyconnect Final, and I'll show you what it looks like. So within there, when you create the Anyconnect configuration file, you get to pick the Anyconnect package that you uploaded earlier. So 4.8 was the one I loaded. And then you also need to pick the compliance module that you downloaded from cisco.com. Okay, so that's the checks for AV, anti-spyware, and things. And these are the different modules that you want to deploy down to the client. So in this case, I don't need to deploy VPN because I already have it. I'm only interested in ISE Posture module, and by default it's always there, so Posture module is always on. And the only thing to get it working is that you need to associate the XML profile for Anyconnect Posture, which we just created before this, called ISE Posture. And then everything else you can just leave default and hit save, and off you go. Okay, so that's it. So now you completed the Anyconnect side of it from a client provisioning perspective, and now we need to go over to Posture. And in terms of, we start by looking at the conditions. What are we going to check? So from a posture perspective, in my demo, I have two conditions that I checked for. One was the file condition. Okay, and file condition just showed you what I built. I created one called file check test 1 by Jerry, and if I go into there, basically I'm checking for the existence of a file in a specific directory. Okay, and you can make this as in-depth as you want to make sure that users don't go in and modify this. So it's just a piece of identity or signature on the device to help you identify if that user device is a corporate PC or not. And I'm checking to see if the file exists. And the second one I'm checking for is antivirus, or actually let's do anti-malware. I call it anti-malware check. And here I'm checking for Bitdefender. Okay, and as you can see here through the compliance module, definitions, there's tons and tons and tons of companies, Kaspersky, Malwarebytes, Windows, etc., etc. They're all there. So I just happen to pick one, any anti-malware vendor for now. I'm checking for the installation. So I have those two conditions that I've created. Now I need to associate this to the requirements. Okay, so I didn't make any changes. That's fine. For posture, I'm going to go into requirements, and I've added those two conditions into the requirements. And so let's take a look at the first one is the file check. So I created a requirement. If you click here and go insert new requirement, you create one called file check, and I'm checking for Windows all using the compliance 4.x module. And then my condition is the one I just built to do a file check, to check my C drive for a specific file. And the remediation action is I'm prompting a message only. So if I go to here, and in my message only, I'm just putting some wording of letting the user know what they were missing here. So that's the first check, first requirement. And the second requirement comes down here from the anti-malware. I also create another anti-malware check requirement for Windows all, compliance module 4.x, Anyconnect client. And this is a condition that I created earlier. And again, I'm doing a message only notification to the client. Okay, so those two have been built. And last is, let's go into posture. And now this is the posture policy, what you will be enabling to check on the client. So I enable these two final policies for Windows anti-malware check, for Windows test file check, and then here I linked in those anti-malware requirements that I just told you about, as well as the file check. So I associated with those two. Now in these two policies, if I drill into them, so this is the malware check one, and you can see that there's a little symbol in front of this check for shows mandatory as a check mark, and dash line means optional. So I made my malware check optional, so it's allowed the user to bypass it. Okay, so that's something you can do. And then same thing with my file check, I made this a mandatory requirement. So if I drill into here, and there's a little checkbox in front of the condition here. See, if I click on it, it's mandatory, optional, or audit. Audit just meaning you're just going to bypass it and just log it only for auditing purposes. But I made it mandatory so that the user must comply. Okay, and then done. All right, next I'm going to go to client provisioning. This is the last step here where I provision how the policy is going to be applied to different platforms. So by default there's iOS platform, Android, Windows, Mac OS, Chromebook, etc. And so I created a unique one called ISE VPN Posture. And identity group is just any device, and I'm looking for the Windows 10 operating system, and I'm tying it to the ASA firewall as a other condition. So anything coming through the ASA firewall in terms of VPN will get this result. And you see here from the result there's an Anyconnect final. That was the Anyconnect configuration we configured earlier as part of the posture portion of it, and then the remaining two pieces aren't really being used in my use case. Now I could have leave this rule out and just use the Windows policy here, and this Windows policy would have captured it and applied the Anyconnect configuration as well, but this by default would have done Ethernet and wire, wireless, etc. So I just created a unique one for the firewall VPN just for the sake of this lab setup and demonstration. Okay, hopefully you found this useful, and thanks for watching.